Welcome to Our People Speak, the program produced by Danakanaga here in Fairbanks. Today's show for the month of June is on fish wheels, and we're very honored to have someone that knows a lot about fish wheels, how to make them, how to use them. Charles Wright, welcome.
Thank you.
Before we start into our questions about fish wheels themselves, could you just introduce yourself a little bit to our audience, please?
Yes, my name is Charlie Wright. I'm from Rampart. Peggy Wright is my mother. The late Edward Mayo and Catherine Mayo are my grandparents. Late Bob Rogers was my father. I grew up in between Tanana and Rampart, fishing, hunting, and trapping my whole life.
And then when it comes to fish wheels, when and how did you start learning about fish wheels?
Well, from when I can remember, my grandpa and uncles built fish wheels, and so I was part of that. Young boys are running to get things, nails, hammers, hand me this, hand me that. So it's been part of my whole life.
Can you talk about a little bit about the usage of fish wheels by families and communities in Alaska? Because our audience is not just in the state of Alaska, but it's nationwide, worldwide. Folks tuning in to hear about these different topics. So could you give a little bit background about the fish wheels?
Well, from what I hear from my elders, the fish wheel has been in Alaska for about 100 years. Turn of the century, 19th century, they started showing up in Alaska. I think they were used down in like the Columbia River first. My great-great-grandpa, Alcat Mayo, is the one that brought it to our area first in Rampart. And the stories I hear the elder tell that was a kid at the time said that when he started building one, or trying to build it and figured out what he had seen him on that river before on his way north. He started in Canada, then ended up in the Rampart area in his later years. And when he started building it, the people of Rampart kind of chuckled at him because they told him that's not going to catch fish. Because everybody was netters and fish trap users and spear users. So when he started catching fish with it, everybody ran to cut poles and gather logs to try to build the same because it worked so well to catch fish. 100 years ago, there was a lot of fish in the Yukon River and the contributaries. So the Rampart area has a narrow, deep rock river. It's a perfect area for fish wheels. It would catch a lot of fish. Yeah, you could only run a fish wheel for so long because there were so many fish that the box would overflow.
Wow. Yeah, we'll talk about the processing of the fish in a few minutes, but could you kind of explain exactly what is a fish wheel when you talk about a fish wheel?
Okay, a fish wheel is kind of a fish trap that is powered by the river, the flow of the current. And they have paddles on it that catch the water and start to turn in. It's two baskets that have a chute in there that when it dips through the water and comes up, it has a chute that angles towards a box on the raft. And when they catch a fish in there, and when the basket goes up, the fish slides out of the basket into a box that holds the fish until you come back to get them. They have a little container on the side of that basket that waters the fish to keep it cool and keep the bugs and the birds off. So it's a really efficient type of fish trap that catches a lot of fish without manpower. So it's a real good thing, a genius contraption, really.
Mm-hmm. Now, you just mentioned logs were used for fish wheels. Can you describe how one is built and what other materials are used?
Yeah, the hardest part for the people out in the bush was to find the wire to put on the baskets. You make a pole frame with small spruce poles, mainly white spruce and black spruce. Some people use tamarack because they bend pretty easy. I guess it's kind of what you live around and what materials, what kind of trees you have where you're at. Mm-hmm. And we use drift logs off the river, great big ones, longer than the fish wheel by about, I'd say, probably 4 feet in the back and at least 12 feet in the front of the fish wheel to make that fish wheel float good. Put 4 or 5 on one side and 2 or 3 on the other, and cross pieces. And then the fish wheel is put on uprights in the middle of the raft, so it can spin in the middle of that raft like that. And they push it out in the water to where it's deep enough for the basket not to hit bottom. And they tie it using the cable most of the time. Back in the day, they used hemp rope, anything they could find, telegraph wire. When I was a kid, one time we braided 3 telegraph wires together to make it stronger, strong enough to hold a fish wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically used what you could find in your area and what you could afford at the time.
And then the current of the river just keeps it in constant motion. Then.
Yeah, you have 2 baskets and 2 paddle arms, one on each side. So when the basket has boards on there, so when the basket goes down, current hits it and pushes it. Then the paddle goes in the water and it just keeps it spinning continuously, keeps fish sliding into the box.
So how long does a fish wheel last? I mean, do you have to make one every year? Or?
When I was a kid, we had to build baskets every year because we didn't have equipment. Sometimes when we build a really nice one, we would carry that fish wheel up the bank, take the baskets off the raft, and set it on the beach so the wind and the sun could dry it up for a little while and make it lighter. Then we'd get enough people to carry it up and put it in the willows so we could reuse it again the next year. But as time went by and all the villages got tractors in the village now, I have a fish wheel that's like 15 years old and it's still sitting on the bank ready to use. We put elevators on there so we could jack the fish wheel way up in the air. And excuse me, don't have to cut nothing off, the paddles or nothing. So you slide it back in the river, push it to your spot, tie it up to a cable and push it out, start running it.
So you talked a little bit about the spot that you put a fish wheel in. How is that area determined? Is it by the families, by the community, or what do you look for someone that may not know where you place a fish wheel?
Well, you need really deep water, and you need to be on the side where the fish run. The fish will bounce off the certain bends of the river. On a bend, taking a sharp right, they'll come through that bend and they'll hit the beach, and then they'll bounce off and they'll go left. And it has to be deep and swift, like a steep bank. So, and you try out places near where you live. Yeah, you move that thing around until you find the best spot. Sometimes it's right in front of the camp. Mm-hmm. You're so lucky that you find a good spot right next to the camp where you could just check it with a canoe. You don't need a motor. People that don't have motors in the past, when we were young, just check it with a canoe. You cut the fish right on the beach there, so you don't have to have gas or a motor and have friends checking on you. Mm-hmm. But it's if you're lucky, you have a spot close to the camp. And some people have to go over 10 miles to their fish wheel because they don't have one close to their camp.
So when you say camp, you're talking about a family's fish camp.
Yeah.
In the summer.
Yeah, the family fish camp is where we went. When I was a kid, we went to Grandma and Grandpa's fish camp near Rampart. And we stayed there almost all summer. We were lucky to go to 4th of July when I was really young. They wanted us there working and learning. That's where we learned what's right from wrong. We learned the whole process of taking care of dogs, taking care of fish, not wasting. We all rotated through the chores. And we was told what was, like I said, what was right and wrong. At night, we talk around the campfire and talk about what happened in that day and how we can do better the next day and who's going to do what. And there was rewards too at camp. There wasn't much sweets or nothing, so they'd always have a big pot of hot chocolate in the evening at my grandma's camp. And if you didn't do your chores, then you didn't get in line. So there was things being taught, and it was important to be good stewards of the land and take good care of your area, keep clean. So it's sad to see now that when you ride along the river, all the camps are brushed over and grassed over, and all you see is smokehouse and the tip of a cabin sticking out. It's real hard now not to live that lifestyle. The salmon culture along the river is going away due to the lack of salmon. And
yeah, we'll get into that in a few minutes. But when you talk about fish wheels, I mean, most people think of salmon. Is it strictly for salmon?
No, you if you have a dog team, you plug every hole in the fish wheel, and a lot of people done that because you want to eat everything, all the freshwater fish. Also, there's multiple sizes of whitefish. There's burbot and pike, but you don't normally catch those in the fish wheel until fall time, until the water gets clear. But the whitefish is really good eating, and pretty much everything that we catch in the fish wheel, goes up the bank at the camp and gets cut. Nothing wasted, and what's not used for human consumption is fed to the dogs. And then when the fall time comes and you start catching the chums, then there's some that's local that's not good for human consumption, and we cut all those for the dogs. Dogs were a big part of the camp life and life when I was a kid. Everybody had dogs.
So when you were growing up, how many fish would you get every day in the fish wheel? And could you just walk us through, how many you got, and then the whole family would help out cleaning the fish and putting them away or drying them?
So in the spring when we first got to camp, we just catch mostly the local fish, the whitefish, and then the start of the run, King Run would get there and start catching 1 and 2 a day, and those were just for eating, for enjoying, until the numbers got more. Sometimes the box would run over. Sometimes there'd be 50 to 100 fish in that box, and they were huge fish. When the wind wasn't blowing in the middle of the night, we could hear the big fish hit that fish wheel, and then they'd be banging in the box so loud that it would wake us up across the river. And all we'd think is, oh, another big fish. But the whole family participated. 2 or 3 of us would go to the fish wheel, and the first thing we'd do is, when we got to the fish wheel, is tie up to it. We had a pole on the fish wheel that we'd check the depth of the water and check it to the basket and make sure that the fish wheel, if the water's going down or going up, we have to adjust the wheel so it'll do as best it can. You want the fish wheel to run like a half a foot above the bottom so that the fish don't sneak under. There's also a lead, what we call a lead, going from the fish wheel raft to the shore, made of poles, so it's like a fence. So the fish coming on the inside of the fish wheel, between the fish wheel and the beach, were led into the wheel so nothing could escape. So that way we could catch as much as we needed. And then sometimes when the fish got running thick, we could only run the wheel for so much time a day, so many hours, because it would be too much. You could only take care of so much fish. And the river was just full of fish when I was a kid. My grandma's camp is on a high bank, and the river's really narrow there. So you could literally see the run coming, the pulse of fish coming. The front one, they'd be jumping in front of it. You could just see them and smell them when they go by. There's an island right above my grandma's camp, and when they salmon feel a change in direction, like the island will make the water different than the normal open channel. So that the leaders will actually, the front runners of the fish salmon pulse would actually jump out of the water to see which way to go. I didn't know that from my grandma's camp. We could see them doing it all the time. They're constantly jumping there. And the biologist told me way later in life that they were looking to see where to go because of the change of the current. So they're really intelligent how they go back to where they spawn at. So they're a lot smarter than we think, I'd say.
Could you talk a little bit about the process once you caught the fish, and you said the whole family gets together to work on them? What exactly do you do?
So 2 or 3 of us would go to the wheel, like I said, check the depth, push it out or pull it in to adjust it. Then we'd take all the fish out of the box, and we'd bring them over to the camp. And if there's a lot of fish, we always have 2 gutters. Gutter is a log with legs on it and a slot cut in there so the fish can sit on it, and that's where you cut the head and the guts out. And then clean it in the river, and we put it in the tub. So if we have a lot, we have 2 people doing that. And there's always one little kid there with a little pot or a coffee can collecting all the hearts, because this is going on early in the morning, at 7 in the morning. So the hearts are going to be the breakfast meat with the pancakes and eggs. So that was one kid's job, to do that every morning, to be down there to collect those. And they did it really, they were happy about it because that's one of the favorite things to eat that tastes the best. Everybody loves fish hearts. Then we bring them up the bank, and the elders of the crew, the grandma, uncles, they'd start filleting. One would start making a brine to salt the fish in. One would start cleaning the poles. A couple would fillet. Then we had the strippers start. And then not all the fish are the same size, so they'd be cutting strips and dry fish and half dry out of the smaller ones. So, and that would change. People would change jobs every day or every couple days, so everybody gets to be good at the whole process. So the kids, the younger kids and the teenagers, they start with the whitefish and start practicing with those. And when I raise my own kids now, they're all adults now. When I was raising them, I tell them they can't make a mistake, so they keep lifting them up and not push them down at the learning table. If they're, we start them with scoring the bellies, and then I tell them you don't have to worry about messing up, because if you don't cut it good enough to dry, then we'll eat it in the morning with pancakes, so it's half dried. So they got so excited when they see that on the table. They're so proud. Look, my fish I cut, they say. And it just brings them up so much. It's amazing to see, and how happy and healthy people are living that kind of lifestyle. It's just amazing, and I sure do miss it.
Yeah. When you were cutting the fish, I mean, you know, every summer there's always flies and mosquitoes and gnats and everything. How did you deal with that? Because I know they're attracted when you're starting to cut the fish. How did families deal with that in their fish camps?
So like I said, as the process starts and you start getting the brine done and the fish process is going on and they start cutting the strips, then somebody goes to making smudges, little pots of fire, smoke. We use driftwood and cotton bark, and they cut grass. They pull grass with a pair of gloves and use a knife, and they pile grass on the top of that little fire they make in the smudge pots, and it keeps the bugs down. You have to hang the strips outside in the wind. They call it a day rack, until they get a little skin on them, a little dryness. They're not wet no more. So the bugs are really attracted, the flies and the bees. Bees love to eat salmon. So that smudge pots are really important. You have to put them upwind, so the wind changes all the time. So there's a couple people just steadily working those smudge pots so they don't get no maggots on the fish. They call them blowflies, the baby worms that the flies lay on them. So really have to keep an eye on it to keep the fish good for human consumption.
Now you talked a little bit about the fish. When you cut the fish, nothing is wasted. You mentioned fish heads, and some may go, ooh, but that's, you know, there's a lot of good nutrition in the fish heads. Did you save them? And I know the elders love them. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And so nothing is wasted at fish camp, nothing at all. The heads are cleaned and they're split. Take the gills out and split them and clean them, and then you could only eat so many heads. So we eat them all the time. It's amazing how many ways somebody could cook fish. And the heads is one of the delicacies the elders love. And so we'd eat them. And then when we get tired of eating them, we'd even salt them in the salt buckets, preserve them that way. And the fins, we cook the fins just the same. And the bigger fins, the collars, and the heads and the bellies, we put them in salt, layer of salt, layer of fish, layer of salt, and then we preserve them that way. Put them in a coal hole behind the smokehouse. So there'll be buckets of that in there. So we could take it out in the wintertime, and we take them up to town and to the village in the fall time before the ice runs, and put them in another hole or in a root cellar in the grandma's old house. So we can access them, and then you soak them in water and get the salt out, and they pickle them or just boil them with potatoes and carrots or onion, or have them just boiled with rice. It's really good. It's just the way that they used to preserve fish before we got generators and freezers. So, I also think that's another reason why there was always so much king salmon, because the king salmon come in the real hot part of the summer, and you didn't have freezers, so you could only keep so much. They were really hard to keep. The elders, when the strips were dry and the dry fish, they put them in canvas bags, and they put them in the cache where it's cool. They had to take them out about every 2 weeks and take them all out of the bag, and they'd wipe them all and go through the whole pile to make sure that there was no mold starting in them. Because if mold started in there, the whole bag would just get green. So a lot of times you see the elders boiling those moldy dry fish that just started getting moldy. They'll wipe them off, they'll rinse them off, and they'll boil them in water, and they'll eat them. So I think that's the main reason why there was so much king salmon all the time, is they couldn't preserve them as well as they could the fall chums when it was colder. You could cut a whole bunch of those, so you could just put them in boxes or bags and put them up on boards in the smokehouse, and it was cold enough for them to stay there because they were salted. They wouldn't get moldy. So I think that's why they lean more on the fall chum back in the day. But of course, the fish was the main part of their food for the winter, for everybody.
So when you think about your youth and your involvement with fish camp and with the fish wheels, what are some of your fondest memories?
Waking up at night, hearing those big fish, hitting the fish wheel, that's one memory that never goes away. And the smells of moose soup cooking on the fire. And this sounds, when I go to that camp still, the big spruce trees, the wind blows through them. It always made me lazy. So I get lazy when I go to Grandma's camp. But just the being together with family was the best part for me, and the part I miss, because we all grew up and went our own direction, and that doesn't happen anymore. So it seems like the only time we get together now is for funerals and stuff. We don't get together for good times and cutting fish hardly anymore. Still, in the past 20 years, my siblings all come together in the village in Rampart, and we cut fish together. So that's what I miss the most, is this family, I think, and being together and working on fish together as one.
When you, what would you say to visitors that don't really know the cultural importance of fish camps and the fish wheels? What would you say to them?
They don't even know. They have no idea. The people that come from the cities, it's a totally different kind of lifestyle. To me, it's kind of like an institutional lifestyle. They don't have that traditional style of being together and living together, and it's mental, physical, and spiritual to the people that live that salmon culture along the river. It's everything. It's their well-being. And I just say that it's the most important thing to me, but it's really hard to make them understand it and explain it to them, because they haven't ever lived it. So they have no idea what it means to us. So that's why I think traditional knowledge is so important to being mixed with Western lifestyle of management of our resources. And I see it now, and I'm very happy that they're starting to finally implicate it and mix it in and listen to the people that were stewards of the land for millennia. And the people done the best at stewarding their own land and managing it, because everything was so rich. There were so many animals, so much fur, so much salmon when the statehood happened. It was astronomical. It took all this time for the outsiders to deplete our way of life, or not our way of life, but our resources that we lived our way of life on. There was so much fish in the Barents Sea that it's taken over 100 years for them to whittle it down to where we're now seeing the effects of it all.
You just, again, for those that aren't familiar with our native way of life, earlier you talked about getting hundreds, 50 to 100 king salmon every day in the fish wheels. Now, because of the situation in our rivers and no fish, basically no one is really they can't put fish wheels out. Can you just talk about what we're facing right now today?
Well, okay, when it comes to salmon in our rivers, it was just 2017, 2018, when I still had to have a block in my fish wheel. Otherwise, I'd catch too much to cut every day. I was still catching from 50 to 70 king salmon in 2019. Now we can't fish or catch one fish. So all of our people have been without. This is, I think, our fourth summer we're going into now that we can't fish. And all the people, that was what filled their freezers. So it's caused a huge hardship. The cash economy of the subsistence lifestyle, that's how everybody made their living. Not making a living, say, matched to a 40-hour week, but making a living to live. We bartered, we traded with that, and so it spread out. And one smokehouse fed 5 families easily. Our smokehouse fed more than that. For us not to have our fish is a total loss of our culture and our way of life and our livelihood and our well-being. It's real hard.
What would you say to the youth about the resources now, fish wheels, summer fish camps, what would you like them to know or think about?
Well, I think in order to continue our traditions, we really need to pay attention to our culture camps, try to stay involved, try to talk to elders. I think elders are really important going into the future. We're working really hard on trying to keep the wild stock of salmon alive in our rivers right now, and hopefully we succeed. But right now for culture camps, we're having to get fish from other areas in Alaska to continue that. So keep your ears open. Try to get involved in the fisheries and learn as much as you can from elders and maybe even school. I see there's a lot of young'uns getting interested in trying to be part of what's going on with our fish right now. And it's a real tough time.
So Charles, you mentioned that even though we are in challenging times, you still go out yourself and teach anybody about how to make a fish wheel. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I volunteered in the past to help people learn how to build a fish wheel. I'll go to culture camps, to any individual camp, to any village. There was quite a bit of interest before the fish crashed in learning how to use a fish wheel. People like to, even on the Kaikouk River, they were asking me, "Do you think a fish wheel could work over here?" And I said, "Yeah, the fish wheel catches the best in the dark because the fish can't see it." And now we're building fish-friendly fish wheels that have mesh and foam in the chutes so that the king salmon don't get hurt. So we have to release the king salmon and the chums that are in trouble now. So if we want to fish for freshwater fish, we have to build a fish-friendly fish wheel to accomplish that. So things have changed, and I like to say too that different parts of Alaska and different rivers use different size and different shape fish wheels. So and I build and build fish wheels for our area and the interior that work on our rivers, and I try to do the traditional steamed bend bows with the round bows in there because they're beautiful, and that's the way I was taught. When I go to teach somewhere, I give them a parts list before they leave the city in the spring to get the staples and wire, the chicken wire to put in the baskets. And I tell them when they get to their camp to cut 100 poles and then collect 7 good straight logs and a couple spars. So when I get there, everything goes really smooth, and I can help them get it built and on a raft and to the spot where they want to run it and actually see it run before I leave. So it's a really good pleasure. I was tricked into learning how to build fish wheel when I was a kid by my stepfather. He told me and a friend that was spending the summer in Rampart. A friend was spending the summer with us fishing and learning and enjoying Rampart in the summertime, and he told us that he'll pay us to build a fish wheel. So we worked hard at night after we're done with chores. It took us about a month, a couple hours here and a couple hours there. And when we said we're done, he was happy. He'd check our work every time we worked on it. If we did something wrong, he'd tell us, "You have to change this." And he was happy that it was finally done, and so we said, "Okay, we're done. We want to get paid now." And he gave us $20 a piece, and we looked at it, and we said, "Where's the rest?" He said, "You ate it." He said, "Now you know how to build a fish wheel. That's the greatest gift of all, and the best pay that you could get." So we looked at each other, and then we agreed, and we went on. So now we got that knowledge now.
And now you're teaching it.
Now I'm teaching it, and he was that kind of guy. He wouldn't show us. He even trapping in the wintertime, he'd make me learn and think like the animal, and so do it myself to learn, so I wouldn't forget. That's what he would tell me. So I really appreciate that. Appreciate him for teaching me that way, so I wouldn't forget. So I'm able to pass that tradition down now.
Well, we really appreciate you coming here and talking about fish wheels. Before we close, is there anything you'd like to add?
I just like to say again to the kids to really pay attention, and if you're interested in your culture and your traditions, to go to culture camps and ask questions and talk to your elders and try to do what you can to be part.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today on our show, Our People Speak, and thank you for joining us. This is the June episode of Our People Speak from Tanakanaga. Thank you.